future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Hey, greetings and salutations, everyone. It is the day before July 4th holiday. Welcome to Dr. Judy, WTF, heard on right here on ubnradionetwork.com, where the number one show right here on Channel 2. We've got a very cool show for you all today, and this is a call-in show. So we are dealing with bipolar disorder. So if you know anybody who has experienced this challenge, or yourself, would love to hear from you because I know you all are radically creative. And the number is area code 323-843-2826. And you can pull us on Stitcher and iTunes and listen to us on TuneIn Radio. And if you have a question or query, you can write us at info@drjudywtf.com. We're going to shrink a really cool song later in the show. And as usual these days, this entire show is brought to you by the Psychological Healing Center with offices in Beverly Hills, Sherman Oaks, and the Globe, because we have the actual founder of Dr. Judy Rosenberg, the founder of Psychological Healing Center, in studio. And she has interns that really want to talk to you. And Judy has too.
And I do too. And
I'd
really love we really love call-ins. So pick up the phone, and if there's any questions that you want to ask away. Pick our brains. Walt is a plethora of information, and tonight's topic is bipolar disorder. It used to be called
manic depressive,
right?
Yes.
And a lot of people are suffering from bipolar, and many people don't understand, is this chemical imbalance? Is this a genetic thing? Is this a psychological thing? Well, I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think that they have found the gene for bipolar. So
no, they haven't. What I read.
I don't think they have. So I like to go to the cause of things, and since I'm a psychologist and not a psychiatrist, I take more of a psychological angle on it. And so my thinking is that the mind and the body are interconnected, and when they're interconnected, as they are, the brain gets affected by the way we are treated. And so we are our own psychopharmacology. And so if our emotions get messed up, then so do our neural pathways and the synapses and the transmitter fluids that go on there. So I'm going to come at it from a more psychological angle, and please feel free to challenge me. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't end up biochemically. Of course it does. And that doesn't mean that you should get off all medication. Of course not.
No, absolutely not.
But that does mean that it's worth exploring the cause behind it, because our emotions are very, very tied to the first few years of life. And I'm now citing attachment theory, which is what I base my entire system and my math system on, is that when we don't get all the emotional nutrients like the breastfeeding, the eye contact, the mirroring, the attunement, then what happens is we are then disconnected from our primary caregiver. And when that happens, we don't know how to regulate our emotions. And when we don't know how to regulate our emotions go awry. And I think manic depressive bipolar is about one of the most extreme examples of emotions gone up and down.
Yep, and there's only about 5.7 million people in the United States, adults, that are living with the bipolar disorder. It affects men and women equally, as well as all races, ethnic groups, and social economic classes. So, I mean, it's not any particular one. It's a very, broad, affected group. What I read a lot of what it is it is genetic in a lot of instances. But bipolar, formerly manic depressive, is a mental illness that brings severe highs and low moods and changes in sleep, energy, thinking, and behavior. People who have the bipolar disorder can have periods of which they feel overly happy and very energized, while other periods they feel very sad, hopeless, and sluggish. And in between these periods, they usually feel pretty normal, and you can think the highs and lows are the two poles of the mood. That's why it's called bipolar.
Right, and to be diagnosed with bipolar, you have to be diagnosed with an official manic episode. It can't just be depression. It can't be hypomania, which is below that mania. It has to have the peaks of the highs and the lows. And Walt, I just wanted to comment on the genetic model, because oftentimes people say this is genetic and that is genetic, and then when I do an exploration of the multi-generational family line, I'll find out that the treatment within the family is all taught, and similar patterns emerge. So they're actually handing down their psychopathology and calling it genetic, when in fact it's because one parent to the one generation to the next is not able to give their family the emotional containment and the nutrients. And so that is the behavioral and the emotional aspect that's passed down, and then they call it genetic because they see a pattern.
Well, so you're talking about nature versus nurture.
Correct.
Or in this instance, nature versus lack of nurture.
Lack of nurture,
All
right?
right.
So that's not genetic.
No, it's not.
No.
But they've done experiments on twins.
Okay, go ahead. I'd love to hear
well,
those.
Well, it's just very genetically, generally, if many instances, one twin will get it, be diagnosed with bipolar, and one twin won't, which is kind of interesting. They still can't figure out why, because obviously they're twins. So the jury is still out on it. So is it genetic? It does run in families, anywhere between 40 to 70%. If mommy or daddy has bipolar disorder, there's a 40 to 70% chance that one of the children will eventually get it, or might get it. Right. Okay, so I mean the odds are mentionable nonetheless.
But what I'm really hearing from a causal level, and I want to get into this because some of you have heard the show, some of you have not. If you would be so kind as to put up my mind map. And
those of you that listen to us on our podcast, you can pull it up on drjudywtf.com.
And so the mind map was based on attachment theory. It's based on a lot of different theories, along with the Freudian repetition compulsion theory, which is why this show is called Dr. Judy with the Freud.
What the Freud? I
Right.
apologize. I meant to mention that earlier.
Okay, so here, what I'm saying about that is, if mom was manic and depressive, bipolar, and so if you look at the mind map, you can see the top panel, the middle row, and the bottom row. And the top row represents the past, how we've been encoded. The middle row is how the past is being played out in the here and now. And then the future is what therapy shifts people into. Okay, so if you look at panel 1, it represents the womb, mother. If you look at that, you will also see black shadows or little dots all over.
Very dark.
That light in the background, and what I meant it to be was a metaphor for mother-infant disconnect, the shadows of our past, the, if you will, I call them infiltrations of the psychoviruses that get into our brain and then warp our sense of perception. So if mom is bipolar, what kind of mom do you think she might be? Do you think she might be regulating her baby's emotions really well?
Chances are no.
Chances are no, unless she's on meds, and sometimes people cannot take meds when they're pregnant. So imagine an unmedicated bipolar mother who is up and down, and now she's got postpartum on top of it.
Yes, that sometimes spurs bipolarism is the postpartum part.
Right, and we talked about this many times, and I will say it so that you will understand the system, is that when the father doesn't nurture the mother, so if there's an absent father, if there's a father, let's say, who's either not there or working too hard or cheating or on some level
It's
not there to nourish.
not as involved as it could or should be.
Right. Then the mother doesn't get nourished and her feelings aren't contained, and then the trickle down on the baby is not really good because she's not able to give the baby the best of her best.
She's not being nurtured by daddy
Right.
and hubby.
Right. And so the bottom line is all these feelings are all over the place, and they're high and they're low, and no one's containing them, and the mother can barely contain her own, and the baby's crying, and the baby needs to be soothed. And at the end of that, it's just all over the map.
The other issues are brain structure. They've looked at the brain development and brain structure,
Okay.
and MRI images and such in a 205 study, and they still have no conclusions. Other, which is a little bit more definitive, is anxiety, depression, and mental disorders.
Okay.
If you've got PTSD, which we've talked about a little bit, post-traumatic stress disorder, or social phobia, sometimes there's a high risk of developing bipolar disorder. And many perhaps explain why 11 to 39% of bipolar patients often meet the criteria of having post-traumatic stress disorder.
Well, see, the post-traumatic stress disorder is the trauma to the amygdala, which is the primitive brain.
Okay.
And so if the post-traumatic stress disorder isn't managed, then the emotions can just, from a mind map perspective, they're not contained any longer. And so they will burst through, they will bleed through, so to speak, and then there will be implosions and explosions. And so
There's your highs and your lows.
There are your highs and your lows, right?
And then sort of in a semi-subset is ADD and ADHD, attentional deficit disorder, of course, and then attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
But see, I like the way they put all these labels on
Yeah,
things,
sure they
right?
do.
They act as if there's no continuum here.
They got to fit in a
okay?
little box. Come on, it's got to go in that box.
Right. Well, I like to fit things in a little box. I have a mind map. Okay.
Well, I'm a guy. I do too.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. And in this case, we're talking about the mental box here, and we're talking about the mind map system of seeing things from an injurious point, an emotional injury, to the reaction to the wound and the encoding of a wound. And then from that point on, it plays out in terms of chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And so when the emotions are not able to be soothed and contained and managed, then a little trigger and bam, that person can just be flying high or crashing low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to talk about a little more about this in a minute. And lastly, there's one issue which I think is substance abuse.
Okay.
They talk about developing a substance use problem can only lead to worsened depression and moodiness, thus prolonging and potentially being a player in some causes of being bipolar. I personally believe that if someone has bipolar and they don't know they have it, or maybe they do, they're trying to self-medicate themselves. And as a result, they're abusing or taking a lot of drugs or alcohol or what else they can do to try and smooth out the highs and the lows. They're self-medicating. So
now,
I'm not sure, even though, for goodness sakes, I'm no psychologist or therapist by any means, but I think they're just self-medicating and trying to overcome what they've got at the best they know how.
You're absolutely right.
And I don't think it's a cause. I think it's a symptom.
They are trying to self-medicate, and what happens is that people with bipolar disorder don't like to comply with medications because nobody likes to knock out the highs.
Yes.
They don't like the lows, but when they're high, they can be building rocket ships and castles in the sky and rock music and some of the most talented people. I think next time I'd like to research who suffers from bipolar. I know that there are many people
I didn't get a chance to do that.
who do that, who do suffer from bipolar, and I believe that many who do are simply highly creative because they have those highs.
Yes.
So it's the light and the darkness again. What makes us rich sometimes hurts us too.
And if you have a high or if you had a really low, you can call us. This is a call-in show, and the number is area code 323-843-2826. And we'd love you to get on the couch with Dr. Judy with your bipolar ouch. And if not, you can actually just contact her at the Psychological Healing Center and talk about this. And you can find more at drjudywtf.com. Along those lines, I found 9 the biggest triggers that they say are triggers of the mood swings that it impacts bipolarism. So I thought I'd start here. Because there are high moments of grandeur to deepest depression lows, and there's 9 triggers here that do it. Some of it is sleep. A lot of these articles talk about sleep.
Yeah.
We as a nation are radically sleep deprived, and you can't just sleep in on a Saturday morning, folks, and expect
up,
and
right?
get caught up. It doesn't work. A change in your sleep pattern is a hallmark system of bipolar disorder. It helps you develop an ordinary life, a schedule around sleep, diet, exercise habits, and make you more effective and efficient. So if you're sleep deprived, sometimes that'll kick in a bipolar episode. Next, a couple of these are really relationship based, which I thought was interesting. One is a really bad breakup. You get a failed marriage, right? Your
But
rock
see,
is gone.
That's what makes me think that this is not a genetic thing, because when we're in the middle of a breakup, we're really replicating an abandonment. So we're reactivating a PTSD. So people who've had abandonment issues with mother-infant disconnect, now breaking up, they couldn't contain their emotions then. Their parents couldn't contain their emotions then. And now we're going through another what the Freud, replicating that same trauma. And then there goes the PTSD, and then there goes the uncontained emotions, and they fly off the handle.
Well, talk about flying off the handle. The next trigger is blowout arguments.
Oh.
They're kind of related, I think. Broken relationships are often the result of untreated bipolar disorder. So they say any type of relationship conflict, whether it's with your partner, coworker, family member, or friend, can trigger stress and send you over the edge, and you have a bipolar episode.
Yeah.
And again, both of these caution and highly recommend to see a therapist, typically a family member or friend. This is just way too much for them to deal with, and you really do need to seek professional help.
Not only for the therapeutic psychoeducation of it, but also because the connection, the emotional relationship between a patient and therapist is very containing.
Yes.
And people need containment. They need regulation. They need their emotions regulated. So it's almost like if mommy couldn't do it, maybe the therapist will do it. And do it in such a fashion that they don't pull abandonments on you and don't replicate the injury, and hopefully reverse the injury, which is what we do at the Psychological Healing Center.
And maybe be a little bit regulated. Next, these two are regulated as well, I think. Boozing and using drugs, which we've talked about. Self-medicating, and about 20% of the time, that sometimes sets off a serious bipolar episode. Okay. 5 people with bipolar disorder have substance abuse problems. I think that might be a little low, personally. 5th is antidepressants and other medications. So again, they're abusing drugs. Again, attempting to, I think, self-medicate. That's my argument. 6th is a brand new season, 20% of the time, when we go from like the summer to the fall or winter, right? We've got the highs and it's the summer and it's wonderful, and depending upon where you live, it gets dark and depressing. So seasonal depression, early winter mania, and mania are during the spring and summer. The goofs up your internal clock. And sometimes that the clock genes, it says here.
And then that goes into the sleep, because then the clock changes, right? And that changes the.
I hate it when we have daylight savings time and changing the clock is tough.
Right.
And we talked about this, a visit from the stork. 67% change of bipolar mood swings in postpartum period. The weeks and months after birth are huge.
So I'm not really hearing the genetic part of this.
Not yet.
Not yet.
8 is job loss, which is another, grieving, stressful issue. And lastly is just grief in general.
So I'm hearing a lot of psychosocial stressors. Yep. By that I mean stressors from the environment, from the relationship, from being pregnant, from all kinds of things. So so the verdict is in about the genetics, and I tend not to concentrate too much on the genetics, because this is not something that we can do anything about.
Yeah, we can't control that.
If you have blue eyes, then you have blue eyes, and we can do all the therapy in the world, and they're not going to turn brown. Nor would you want them to, right, Walt?
No, I'm afraid not. No,
Afraid
not I. Thank you.
Okay, not I.
Some
Unintended, right?
Some of the effects on the family is obviously vast. And we're going to talk about loved ones and such. I thought I would just touch on some of the effects, which are pretty obvious, but it strains on families. What can families do if you find that you have a loved one or a family member in general? First and foremost is educate yourself. Because, this is an illness. It's kind of like diabetes, right? It's an illness. Granted, there's a little bit more involvement of the family, but it's still nonetheless, you're dealing with someone who's ill. Second is support your family. It's not an easy thing to go through, and we all need to support each other as much as possible. The person who has bipolar, you need to believe in them because they can't control this. It's something that's in them, and they're trying to deal with it themselves as best they can, and continue to love them, even when you just want to give up.
And really importantly is sometimes the family members suffer just as much.
Yes, absolutely.
As the person with the bipolar. Yeah. I remember I had an opportunity to do some continuing education unit seminaring with a gentleman whose daughter was bipolar. He's a psychologist, and what I remember most is just how hard it was on the family. And secondly, he introduced something that I really was bowled over by, which is instead of lithium carbonate, there's another product that the big farms don't want you to know about called lithium orotate, and it's not expensive. Please research it. Don't take my advice. I'm not a psychiatrist, but there is another substance out there. It's natural. It's not costly, and it is doesn't have
well, probably
side
has
effects.
a gob of side effects.
It doesn't
and it's going to
have.
goof you up as much. Yes, I'm saying
Right.
is yeah, and it doesn't surprise me that the pharmacological world isn't too thrilled on that.
But what's so interesting is the stuff that has the side effects and hurts people is FDA approved.
Of course.
And the stuff that's cheap and accessible to people isn't FDA approved.
What a surprise.
Isn't that a surprise?
What a surprise.
Right.
They talk a lot in here about the fact that a lot of families that have a member in their family having bipolar disorder feels guilty. They feel that in some respects they were the cause of this individual becoming ill, which is not true at all. So, there's emotional distress in terms of the effects on the family. Guilt, grief, worry. You got a person who's manic and they're out there being manic. What are they going to do? What's going to happen? This is a disruption, of course, in the regular routines because it's just not normal.
And then there's a financial impact because
Yes.
people who go manic, as I'm sure some of these research articles point out, will do extensive amounts of shopping.
Yeah, they do.
And
Very
so-
reckless behavior.
Very reckless
Yes, and
behavior.
bizarre.
So by the
Yes.
end of the spree, the end of the episode, your person's left with a lot of damage, and the collateral damage is the damage that the family has to then incur.
That's the two of them I just mentioned. Bizarre and reckless behavior and financial stress because of that.
Yeah.
Strained marital and family relationships, obviously. Change in family roles, right? You've got mom or dad that's all of a sudden they were kind of the pillar of the family, and all of a sudden they're like bouncing off the walls. Difficult maintaining relationships outside the family, and health problems which are increased because of stress.
So taking a more holistic approach, and this is just logical, it just seems like people suffering from this disorder can really benefit by things like meditation, easier on the medication if possible, not to discourage that at all, but bring in the meditation, bring in the yoga, bring in the massage therapy, and bring in anything that's going to soothe the person, because this is an inability to really regulate, and they now dysregulate their emotions.
Yep. And again, this is really not an easy thing because we've got 9 ways to help you. Your bipolar loves cope, and the first one is again educate. Right?
Right.
It's just like it's not an easy thing to do and get, and there's a lot of differences of opinion. So you want to be informed, and sometimes that can help.
And not only educate for the bipolar individual, but educate the family and the significant others friends and so on around that person, because they can go into that state.
Yes.
And people get confused as to what's going on.
They talk about two supportive groups. One is the National Alliance of Mental Illness, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, or the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. So that's the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. So those obviously are two groups that, in terms of resources, that would obviously be very, very helpful in educating. Learn how to talk to your loved one, because they're basically intimating that when they're not in the highs and they're not in the lows, they're a little more normal, then actually, you can take advantage of that situation and talk to them. Because when they're ill, they really do turn into a different person. It's like this one person said, I'm saying goodbye to my husband, so to speak, and hello to bipolar James. He just goes crazy, and he's not the guy I married, but he's still my husband.
Maybe Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde
Yes.
Was kind of themed off of that.
Could have been.
Yeah.
Could very well have been. When they start going in that direction, you do have two options in terms of them saying, I got to do this and I got to do that, or I need that, or they're having their episode. You can take the bait and have a messy fight, and accelerate the issue, or you can just grit your teeth and say, it's the illness speaking. This really isn't the person I know or the person I love. It's just the illness is taking over, and you just have to put it in perspective. Third is making rules. We're always talking about setting boundaries, right? The fire drills in primary schools you pray would never happen during math pop quiz. Well, there's a list of symptoms that go on, so you've got to, have some rules, like call a doctor if they're sleeping more than 3 days at a time, or if they're bouncing off the walls or having crying spells and stuff. There needs to be a trigger, if you will, of a number of events or a length of time of an event or an occurrence, saying, hey, this is going a little farther than normal. We need some assistance and some help.
And Walt, you brought up the idea, the point about medication and drug abuse and use, and sometimes it's really hard to make the distinction. You don't know if the person's sleeping in for 3 days because they're high and they're exhausted from their high.
Yeah, they're coming down.
It's just really, really, really difficult. So don't diagnose yourself. Go to a psychiatrist to get a good diagnosis of what's going on. And then I would say your next step is to be diagnosed in terms of the proper medication to be on, and then go see a psychologist to figure out the cause behind it and work with the two individuals. I have patients whereby I work with a psychiatrist, and it's called a multidisciplinary treatment process. So we're both working on the person, and we're both exchanging information so that we can give that individual the best treatment possible.
If you are just tuning in, you have tuned into Dr. Judy WTF, which of course is What the Freud, and we are having a discussion here on the bipolar disorder, what to do and what not to do, and how to help a loved one who has this illness and the disorder. And we're talking about ways to help a loved one and help you cope with the challenge. And the fourth one is plan for emergencies, because you're dealing with someone that could do some very erratic and very bizarre behavior, and they are ill. So, and sometimes the stuff they pull might be life-threatening. They may overdose on drugs. They may just go crazy and be all over the place, driving crazy or whatever. Right. So there needs to be a list, aside from a therapist or a psychiatrist,
like
that you can call for help.
911. How about
911?
That's easy to remember.
Yeah.
And also be aware that just like what you were saying, people might go too far, in which case they're going to end up in a psych ward and in psychiatric care, and will have to be on a 5150, which is a 72-hour hold.
Yep.
And then that might roll over. I forgot the numbers, but it rolls over to more of a hold. And so it's best to prevent these kinds of things. And I don't know if enough is spoken about this, but I believe that diet is very, very important. So that if you're eating a lot of sugar, drinking a lot of caffeine, if you're eating a lot of processed foods and carbs and chemically based foods and non-organic foods. I think that could whack out our emotions. We did an
Sure.
episode on
Food and mood
and
a
mood
long
and
time
food.
ago.
And so think about that. The mind and body are interconnected, and so we want as much balance as possible.
I had one friend say that if you look at the box of whatever you're eating from or eating off of, and you cannot pronounce more than one ingredient in it, chances
Don't
are
eat
you
it.
probably shouldn't be eating it.
Right.
And shop in the perimeter of the store where you got the fresh food and stuff and fresh
Right.
vegetables.
Right.
And I know it's just a mess in terms of stuff that's in our food. Artificial and natural flavors. Listen is number 5. When people are talking, there's no need to do anything but receive them. Just take it in and listen and really care and be attentive, because that's a time where you might be able to hear them, and don't hesitate to say nothing, because silence often speaks more than speaks the most loving message.
I like that. Silence speaks the most loving
Silence
message.
speaks the most loving message.
And also, don't think that you have to jump in and join in their, quote, adventure. So if they want to fly off to Paris and they're getting 2 tickets, one is for you, one is for them, for that quick flight out, you don't have to take that flight into mania with them. Stay grounded.
And along those lines, the next is go gentle.
Mm-hmm.
I can't count the times I had to try Eric's patience with his reckless highs and debilitating lows with his bipolar disorder. When I get fired up and want to sign up when he gets fired up and sign up for 60 new activities, only to not to mention losing my car keys, cell phone, and purse. It was difficult for him to, not to get annoyed. So a little kindness and gentleness toward your loved one, especially at those times that you feel incapable of affection or care, goes a really, really long way.
Right, because you can burn out really, really easily around this disorder. It makes the people around them exhausted. And sometimes you don't even know that it's coming on, and they're just talking and creating, and it just draws you in, and some of it could be very fun and interesting, and then you find yourself really, really tired, and you don't know how long this is going to go on for, and they don't know how long this is going to go on for either.
Well, it's funny. The second one more after this one talks about that exact thing. Laughter goes a long way, pretty much in anything. Humor heals in so many ways. It combats fear. It loosens anxiety. Anxiety's death grip on your heart and every other living organ. It comforts and relaxes. It boosts a person's immune system. So laughter dissolves tension, stress, anxiety, irritation, anger, grief, and depression. So we might try and find humor if you can. It's always fun to do that anyway in situations. And lastly is get support for yourself, because burnout is a big deal. And if you are burnt out, you aren't any good to yourself nor your loved one.
You get to set boundaries, and you get to say, I'm leaving now, as long as you know that the person is safe. And if they're not, then maybe it is time to call the pet team, 911.
Yeah, and that's a tough decision. But there comes a point where, you've had it way, way, way up to here, and you're just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't be the hospital, the therapist,
Right.
the manager, the watching out what they're doing or not doing, or them sleeping, in bed and not even eating or barely crawling out of bed for a week. There's the other extreme as well. Has issues.
Right.
So in terms of dealing it from a family member, communication is a huge, huge important thing. You want to keep the lines open between your relative, and try to project the positive thoughts about their recovery, because again, there will be times where things will calm down, and you have to realize this isn't really the person, it's the illness, as much as you don't want to believe it, but it is. It's just very consuming of the whole family. And you want to, again, in terms of support, you want to network, broaden your network of people who can help you in ways, professionals, friends, and whatnot, because you can't do this alone. It's just can get, especially the manic stuff, can radically overwhelming.
Yeah, and then the depression is so low.
Severe. Yeah.
Just as high as they get, there's this rebound of depression, and so from a psychoanalytic perspective, mania is a defense against depression. So you can see how people will cycle through. They'll hit that bottom, and then they need to do something to just dig themselves out of the hole. So they'll go into the manic state, and then they'll exhaust themselves, and then they go into the depressive state, and then they have to go high to get out of that hole, and it's just horrible, horrible,
It's a roller coaster.
exhausting,
Yeah.
vicious cycle. Causes a lot of chaos.
Absolutely, a
Right.
ton of chaos.
Right.
But one of the things that they talked about is balance. And what you have to do is live your own life. You can't take your life and live it around a person who's got radical highs and radical lows. You know, you need to be proactive in this versus reactive.
Right. It almost seems like Codependence Anonymous
Yes.
might be a good place for
Yes.
for the members,
on my
the
notes,
family members.
Somewhere in notes, I wrote somewhere being a codependent in this. Yeah. Because again, if your life doesn't stop and revolve around their illness, you have to take care of your own health and your own needs, or you aren't going to be any help and strength to help them cope.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Know the warning signs. Obviously, that takes a little bit of experience, and you're going to get thrown for a loop early on. But there's some things that may trigger an episode. So learn what to watch for and kind of be, again, a little bit more proactive in terms of what's going on. That's not easy to do,
Not
but
at all.
but it can be done. And don't expect too much of yourself. Surprise, surprise, you're not a Superman or Superwoman. There are limits to what you can handle. It's natural for your emotions to vary. You are dealing with a serious situation. It's natural. You can feel angry, frustrated, and exhausted. These are valid feelings, and one shared by all family members that have bipolar. So cut a little kindness to yourself as well into the equation.
And if you go too far, you'll know that you're over-functioning, and you probably will experience a lot of burnout and resentment, and then you cannot be in a position to help any longer.
And again, there's guilt involved, but you can't blame yourself. You know what? You got to stand firm, and it is what it is. And you got to have a little bit. What's the line? Love must be tough. You can't let them hurt you, because you have, again, your own life, your own situation, and again, being proactive and trying to figure out what to do as opposed to just reacting all the time. It can help make a big difference. And communication, again, about your system. Find a self-help group in your area. You're not alone in this. There's almost 6 million people in the United States that have bipolar. And I have found also, from my experience, that it's very difficult to diagnose, and typically someone in their late 20s, mid-20s, even 30s are finally able to figure out what the heck they've got. So it's not like you wake up one morning and you find out someone's got a bipolar and they're in their teens. It's just something that just evolves, and get more highs, more lows, and more experience, and professionals have a really challenging time diagnosing it.
And because there's that aspect of the dual diagnosis, someone may be suffering from bipolar, and on top of it, they have a dependency on a substance. So imagine
Right.
a
Self-medicating.
bipolar person using cocaine, right? Or self-medicating with alcohol, what that would look like. And it's hard to decipher which is which.
Yeah, and so that's one of the challenges and reason why it's very difficult to diagnose.
Right.
So again, seek counseling for yourself, let alone the person with the illness, because you need some assistance. You're not the hospital, you're not the emergency service or anything. It's you've got your own situation in life to live. Don't give up. You can't give up, because sooner or later, a recovery from episode is not often a straight path, but relapses are common. Wellness is achievable. It's definitely achievable if they finally get it managed. You can identify some of the highs and the lows and some challenges, and you find the right mix of medication, because a lot of times medication really, really will help. And of course, for those of you who've experienced this, they're on the medication and things are clipping along just great, and then one day they feel like, you know what, I don't need this anymore. I'm feeling really just fine. They pop off the medication, and boom.
I remember treating a young man who we weren't clear what it was, but we did a lot of work around the cause, and he was severely abused as a child, and remarkably did tons of work around expressing the suppressed angry feelings, and the psychotherapy really helped. And ultimately what really helped him was to be in the hands of a psychiatrist and be in treatment with right now one of my members of the team, and that just seems to work best for him. And it just seems that the more he's able to process his feelings, and this is the case with all the people that I see, is that the more they're able to process the feelings, the less dependent on medication they become. And sometimes I'm very fortunate, and the patient is very fortunate. This morning I had a young lady who has been with me she did 3 months of work, and now she's on a follow-up plan, severely depressed, and she did this without medication. Now, she didn't have the bipolar, but that was a case where we did so much processing and expressing the repress, and she didn't implode and explode anymore, so she totally unloaded, no medication.
So she's more balanced.
Oh my God, today we were talking about her in panel 7, 8, and 9, and she's starting to get interested in connecting with spirituality. It was just really beautiful. She looks like a different person. She seems like a different person. She's not even used to herself as this different person, because she's expecting to wake up with depression, and she doesn't wake up with depression anymore. She's full of life.
Well, I can only imagine that 3 months is pretty quick, Dr. Judy.
Yeah.
And our friends and family are going, what happened?
Well, the mother in this case participated in the healing, and
Good.
it was extremely powerful. And now she's just on a once-a-month maintenance plan because she's growing, and she's now catching up and kind of looking at her life going like, gee, I missed out on those years because I was in that deep, dark hole with a horrible core belief that she wasn't lovable. And the cause behind this was mother-infant disconnect. Mother gave her to, had to go back to work, and she had multiple caregivers.
Right.
And she never made a connection to anyone,
Yeah.
so she just shut down, and she couldn't trust, and she couldn't bond, and yeah.
I want to finish real quick with just a couple quick comments in terms of supporting some of the bipolar, again, for the family, because some of these will really jump out. Don't regard this as a family disgrace or a subject of shame, because again, it's like diabetes or any other illness. It's an illness that can be treatable. Don't nag or preach or lecture them. It's not going to do anything for them, because it's a chemical imbalance, and it's just not going to go anywhere. Don't have the holier than thou martyr attitude. Well, I'm able to do this. Why can't you? They can't do it. It's not something that they can control. Don't use the "if you love me" approach. If you love me, you wouldn't have this. Well, they love you, but they're stuck with this. If the person's using drugs, don't take them away. They're just going to go get more. And in some respects, they're trying to self-soothe. They're trying to cope and self-medicate.
Or tell them that. Tell them that there's a better alternative, and they can go to a psychiatrist and be properly evaluated for the right concoction, because this way they're being their own psychiatrist, and that's not going to work really well.
Don't be jealous of the method of recovery they choose, because it's their recovery, right? You might feel left out when they turn to people for moral support. Well, you know what? They need to get all the help they can get from wherever they can. Don't expect immediate recovery. This is a very, very long-term journey. It's huge. And don't try to protect the person from situations which you believe they might find stressful or depressing. They must learn from themselves what works best for them, especially in social situations. It's just, and a couple more. Don't do it for the person that what they can do for themselves. You don't want to be codependent. They can do it. They need to take responsibility and do it themselves, whatever that might be. And lastly, offer love, offer support, offer understanding, help them in recovery. There are advantages and disadvantages to everything, but again, it really, all the help and love and support is going to make all the difference in the world. It really, really will, because it impacts the family, but it also is the family that's going to help and impact them get better.
And that's the system, because when you think systems, then you know that we're all interconnected, And because we're all interconnected, on some level we have to watch out for each other. That doesn't mean you don't watch out for yourself, but you watch out for yourself, and at the same time you contain the person and get them the right kind of help, because you may not be the right kind of help for them in terms of the treatment.
Yeah.
Don't try to treat these people. Don't try to treat your family members. Yeah.
On any score for stuff like this,
right.
especially in bipolar, it's just
Right.
it's not going to work.
Right.
So if you want some of the notes from the show, you can just write us at info@drjudywtf.com. If you want to talk to Dr. Judy or one of her associates on a sliding scale, just go to drjudywtf.com and get some information. And if you have a question that we didn't answer or want to answer, this was actually an idea of a show from a friend of mine who thought it would be a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a little experience with this, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And in the next couple of weeks, we are going to do the What the Film. We're going to shrink inside the movie Inside Out. It's a huge, huge Pixar movie. And Judy and I both want to go see that and do a review.
Yeah, we are. And I had a very nice write-up, and it was short but sweet. They did a write-up in I think it was the Hollywood Reporter. So you can Google that article, Inside Out, Dr. Judy Rosenberg's comments, Hollywood Reporter, and that was out a couple of weeks ago. And so there's more to come. Lots of stuff coming out soon. Keep you posted about it. Yeah.
The song we're going to shrink here is by Matchbox 20. It's called Unwell. So I'm going to read the lyrics, and then Dr. Judy is going to interpret it from her mind map perspective. All day staring at the ceiling, making friends with the shadows on my wall. All night hearing voices telling me that I should get some sleep because tomorrow might be good for something.
So clearly this person is on the depressive side of the manic, right?
Yes.
And the sleep, he realizes or she realizes, is super important. And so maybe that day will be functional. Maybe if they get some good sleep, the day is good for something.
Right. You don't want to spend you lose half the day and you want to spend the other half looking for it.
Right.
Hold on, feeling like I'm headed for a breakdown and I don't know why. But I'm not crazy. I'm just a little unwell. I know right now you can't tell, but stay a while and maybe then you'll see a different side of me. I'm not crazy. I'm just a little impaired. I know right now you don't care, but soon enough you're going to think of me and how I used to be me.
Wow, that's a mouthful. But
Yeah.
okay, so the person's saying, okay, well, I'm not crazy, and but they know they kind of feel that way,
Yeah.
right? And then they're saying, well, if you stay a while, you're going to see a different side of me, like maybe the manic side or the depressive side. And right now you don't care because there's nothing really much going on, but soon you're going to think of me and how I used to be, remembering that I've had my ups, I've had my downs, I've had my norms, and you're going to just see many, many, many different dimensions of me.
Like I'm talking to myself in public, dodging glances on the train. And I know, they've all been talking about me. I can hear them whisper. And it makes me think there must be something wrong with me. Out of all the hours thinking, somehow I've lost my mind.
Well, this seems to be taking a little bit of a paranoid turn, doesn't it?
Yes,
Right? So
yeah.
I'm talking to myself, so maybe there's a little tiny break of psychosis happening, manic depressive with psychotic episodes, and there's a bit of paranoia. They're all talking about me. I can hear them whispering probably about me, and there's a big sense of self-consciousness. They can sense that there's something wrong with me.
And then the chorus, but then I've been talking in my sleep. Pretty soon they'll come to get me. Yeah, they're taking me away. So maybe they realize how messed up they are.
Looks like a 5150s happening right there, right?
Yeah.
They'll take me away because actually the person cannot contain themselves, so they've got to be contained.
And again, the chorus, but I'm not crazy. I'm just a little unwell. I know right now you can't tell, but stay a while and maybe then you'll see a different side of me. I'm not crazy. I'm just a little impaired. And I know right now you don't care, but soon enough you're going to think of me and how I used to be. Yeah, how I used to be. I'm just a little unwell. How I used to be. I'm just a little unwell. And sooner or later you're going to just be me.
And you know what's so crazy about that is that they keep saying I'm a little unwell, and then they launch into all these paranoid ideations and so on and so forth. So they know that they're really not well at all, but they keep denying that they're not well at all. That's part of it too, is that they don't take sometimes as seriously these, I'm okay, I don't need my medication, I'm just a little unwell.
It's all relative.
It's all relative.
It's
right.
all relative with your relatives.
Right, with the relatives.
That is our show, folks. This is Dr. Judy, WTF, which is What the Freud. And you can hear us every Thursday night at 8 o'clock here on UBN Radio Network, Pacific Time. You can pull us on Stitcher and iTunes, and, of course, the app on your smartphone of UBN Radio Network. And I am your host, Walt Lusk, with Dr. Judy Rosenberg. We're going to close out with our show. And take care, everyone, until next time. God bless.
All day, staring at the ceiling, making friends with shadows on my wall. All night, hearing voices telling me that I should get some sleep, because tomorrow might be good for something. Hold on, feeling like I'm headed for a breakdown, and I don't know why. But I'm not crazy, I'm just a little unwell. I know right now you can't tell, but stay a while and maybe then you'll see a different side of me. I'm not crazy, I'm just a little impaired. I know right now you don't care, but soon enough you're gonna think of me and how I used to be me, and talking to myself in public, dodging glances on the train. And I know they've all been talking about me. I can hear them whisper, and it makes me think there must be something wrong with me. Out of all the hours thinking, somehow I've lost my mind. But I'm not crazy, I'm just a little unwell. I know right now you can't tell, but stay a while and maybe then you'll see a different side of me. I'm not crazy, I'm just a little impaired. I know right now you don't care, but soon enough you're gonna think of me and how I used to be. But stay a while and maybe then you'll see a different side of me. I'm not crazy, I'm just a little impaired. I know right now you don't care, but soon enough you're gonna think of me and how I used to be.